Her own granddaughter locked her out in freezing cold, while the party went on without her. Elaine Mercer didn't cry. She just watched from the porch, soaked and shivering. By morning, the house would belong to her alone, deed signed, locks changed, and access revoked. She'd spent decades keeping this home safe. Now she was protecting it fiercely. No more gifts, no more excuses. And when they came back, only the keys in her hand would open the door. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The wind cut sharp across Elaine's cheeks as she stepped onto the porch, her slippered feet crunching into the brittle crust of last night's snow. She hadn't grabbed a coat, just the thin cardigan draped over her nightgown, as she shuffled toward the mailbox at the end of the walk. The sky hung low and gray, and the icicles along the gutters caught what little light filtered through the clouds. Inside the house, laughter rose in bursts, shrill and careless, laced with champagne, the kind of laughter that didn't pause to listen. Elaine opened the cold brass mailbox and pulled out a stack of envelopes, bills mostly, along with a slick catalog she hadn't subscribed to. Her fingers were already going numb when she turned back to the door. That's when she heard Brandy's voice, clear through the living room window. "Start without her." More laughter. Someone clinked a glass. The sound of wrapping paper tearing. Elaine stepped up to the door and twisted the handle. It didn't budge. She tried again, using both hands this time. Locked. She knocked, firm but not panicked. Then again, louder. Her breath came out in short puffs, visible in the frigid air. No one came. She leaned closer to the glass pane on the door, squinting past the fog of condensation. Through the frost-speckled window, she could see the coffee table crowded with brightly wrapped gifts. Tasha was already slicing the cake. Eli lounged on the couch, scrolling on his phone. Brandy sat cross-legged on the floor, laughing as she opened a gift box and pulled out a pair of fur-lined boots. Boots Elaine herself had paid for last month at the outlet mall. None of them looked toward the door. Elaine raised her hand to knock again, but paused. The silence on her side of the glass was deafening. Snow began to drift sideways under the wind's push, sticking to the hem of her flannel pajama pants. She shifted her weight, one foot wet, then the other. The door stayed shut. "Hello?" she called. "Brandy? Tasha?" Her voice vanished into the storm. Her hands, shaking now, gripped the cold iron railing as she stepped off the porch. Each breath felt sharper than the last, her cardigan useless against the wind now howling between houses. Her slippers were soaked, her socks chilled to the bone. From the corner of her eye, a curtain moved in the house next door. Moments later, Mrs. Harding emerged from her front steps in a long down coat, the kind zipped all the way to the chin. Her boots made sure, careful tracks through the snow. "Elaine?" she called out. "What on earth?" Elaine didn't speak. She just looked up, mailbox still in one hand, birthday card poking out crooked from the top. Mrs. Harding didn't ask questions. She simply opened her own front door and held it wide. Elaine stepped inside the warm foyer and said quietly, "They locked it." Mrs. Harding closed the door behind them with a firm click. She didn't respond at first, just reached out and gently brushed a crust of snow from Elaine's shoulder. "Come in. Sit by the heater. I'll put the kettle on." Elaine nodded, throat tight, feet heavy. As she peeled off her wet slippers, the voices from next door rose again. More laughter, a toast, someone clapping, her own birthday party still going, without her. Elaine sat down at the small kitchen table and stared at the birthday card in her hand. The envelope had started to curl from dampness, its edges faintly bleeding blue. She didn't open it. Instead, she looked up at the old mantel clock above the stove. Tick, tick, tick. The second hand crawling forward like it was holding its breath. The kettle began to steam. Elaine blinked once, slowly, and said, more to herself than to anyone, "They started without me." Mrs. Harding placed a hand on hers. "You don't have to finish it with them either." Elaine didn't reply, but as she sat there, listening to the whistle of the kettle rise, she made a decision. It started with the filing cabinet upstairs. The house was still warm when Elaine stepped back in, but it felt like stepping into a shell. The laughter had dulled to low conversation. The cake had been sliced down to crumbs. Wrapping paper lay scattered on the rug like discarded skin. Brandy was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up. Tasha glanced over from the kitchen island, holding a plate of half-eaten cake. "It was a joke," she said with a weak smile. "Lighten up, Mom." Elaine closed the door behind her with a quiet finality. Snow melted from the soles of her slippers, forming a soft trail on the wood floor. She didn't take off her cardigan. Brandy spoke without lifting her gaze. "You already saw your gifts this morning, remember?" Elaine looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes rested not on Brandy's face, but on the boots stretched across the ottoman, still tagged, untouched by snow, warm. Her silence thickened the room. Eli appeared from the hallway, yawned, and muttered something about needing a smoke. The back door creaked open, letting in another blast of cold. Tasha busied herself with refolding a torn gift bag, her eyes avoiding Elaine's entirely. Elaine's gaze drifted to the coffee table. The shiny boxes had all been opened. Tissue paper wilted from their corners. Ribbons tossed aside like they meant nothing. Then she spotted it. Under the edge of the table, next to an empty Solo cup and a balled-up napkin. A small square box wrapped in silver paper, neatly folded. The tag read, in her own handwriting, "To Mom. Love, Brandy." It hadn't been touched. She bent down slowly, picked it up, and held it in her hands. The paper was smudged now, dulled from the floor. A glob of frosting clung to one corner like a thumbprint no one bothered to clean. She didn't say a word, just stood up, walked past the couch, and started up the stairs. "You're welcome, by the way," Brandy called after her, voice thin with performative cheer. Elaine didn't stop. At the top of the stairs, she paused to catch her breath, not because she was tired, but because she needed to steady something inside herself, something old and soft that had just gone still. In her room, she set the silver box on her dresser. It made no sound when it landed, like it didn't contain anything at all. She crossed the room and opened her closet. Behind the row of neatly pressed cardigans, behind a stack of quilted linens, there was a lockbox screwed into the back wall. A pale blue filing cabinet tucked out of view, its finish chipped, handle worn smooth from years of use. She knelt down, reaching into her jewelry box for the key. It was still there, tucked beneath the old brooch shaped like a sparrow. The lock gave way with a soft click. Inside, rows of manila folders labeled in neat, even script, deed, taxes, utility bills, bank statements going back a decade. Some yellowed at the edges, others still crisp. She ran her fingers across them slowly, reverently. This was the record of everything she had built, everything she had paid for, protected and preserved. In a house where no one said thank you anymore. Elaine pulled out one folder, then another, stacking them on her bed like a builder gathering her materials. From the window, she could still hear Eli laughing in the backyard, muffled through the glass. Downstairs, Brandy had turned the music back on. Something synthetic and loud pulsed faintly through the floorboards. Elaine turned toward her nightstand, opened the drawer, and pulled out her check register. It had been updated meticulously, just as her late husband used to do. That steadiness was still in her. But tonight she wasn't just balancing numbers. She was counting lines, drawing them, redrawing them. Her hand hovered over the last entry. Then she reached for a blank notepad and uncapped her pen. Whatever came next, it would begin here, in her own ink, on her own terms. As the house thumped quietly with the sound of someone else's music, Elaine opened the manila folder marked Legal, Property, and Access, and began to underline. The next morning, the snow had stopped falling, but the cold was sharper, meaner. Elaine sat at the dining table with the blinds cracked just enough to let in the gray morning light. The manila folders were spread out in front of her like a game of solitaire where every card had her name on it. The furnace kicked on with a dull thud beneath the floor. Upstairs, Brandy was still asleep. Eli's coat was slung over the banister. Tasha had already left for work. Without saying goodbye, Elaine reached for her calculator and clicked it awake. She started with the water bill, 8 years' worth of payments, everyone drawn from her account. Gas, electric, property taxes, trash pickup, all hers. She double-checked the routing history. No contribution from Brandy. Nothing from Eli, of course. Not even Tasha. Not since Rick died. Elaine leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. It had once been her and her husband sitting at this table calculating Christmas budgets. Now it was just her, and a mountain of proof that no one else had lifted a finger. She picked up her phone and scrolled until she found the contact. Gina Reyes, family law/property. Elaine tapped call. "Elaine," Gina's voice answered, cool and steady. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." They spoke for 12 minutes. No emotion, just facts. Elaine asked, her questions in a flat, clear tone. Gina answered in the same rhythm. Yes, the house was solely in Elaine's name. Yes, she could issue a reclaim notice. 30 days' notice was all it would take to legally remove anyone not contributing or on the deed. No, she didn't need a confrontation to begin the process, just documentation. Elaine looked down at the folders surrounding her. She had documentation in spades. As they wrapped up the call, Gina said, "This'll be cleaner than you think, but I'll need every record." "You'll have them by the end of the week," Elaine replied. She hung up and stood slowly. The silence of the house was suddenly loud. Her slippers dragged slightly across the tile as she walked to the drawer beside the refrigerator. She pulled out an old yellow legal pad and began listing items by category: utilities, mortgage, incidentals, Wi-Fi, groceries, auto renewals. She didn't even need to look at receipts. She knew by memory what had gone out, what had come back. Nothing. There was a soft knock on the back door. Mrs. Harding stood there bundled in wool, a thermos of something steaming in her hands. Elaine opened the door with a smile so faint it barely qualified. "Thought you might need a warm-up," Mrs. Harding said, stepping inside. "You look like a woman doing math in more than dollars." Elaine offered a half nod and motioned to the table. "You need anything witnessed?" Mrs. Harding asked quietly, scanning the spread of documents. "Not yet," Elaine replied, "but maybe soon." Mrs. Harding nodded like she already understood more than Elaine had said. As the door closed behind her neighbor, Elaine heard movement upstairs. Brandy's voice filtered down the hall, echoing off the walls. Eli's deeper tone followed, groggy and annoyed. Then the unmistakable sound of music blaring, cheap speakers, distorted bass, some auto-tuned mess that shook the kitchen light fixture. Elaine exhaled once through her nose, calm, steady. She returned to her seat, picked up her pen, and underlined the phrase, "Total property ownership, single holder." By mid-afternoon, a Jeep pulled into the driveway, lights flashing as a group of Brandy's friends piled out, one of them carrying a bag of red Solo cups, another dragging a Bluetooth speaker the size of a small suitcase. Elaine didn't move from her chair. The music rose. Laughter followed. Someone knocked over a plant on the front porch. No one cleaned it up. Elaine stood, crossed to the hallway, and opened the breaker box. She looked at it for a long time, her finger hovering over a single switch labeled basement/party room. She didn't flip it. Not yet. Instead, she quietly slid her folders back into a new stack, sealed them in a canvas bag, and zipped it shut. This time, she wasn't just collecting evidence. She was building a case. Elaine stood in line at the Buffalo post office, a canvas tote over her shoulder and gloves clutched in one hand. The woman behind the glass barely looked up when she called, "Next," but Elaine stepped forward with quiet authority. "I'd like to forward all mail for the address on this form to my legal representative," she said, sliding over a neatly filled-out USPS 3575 form. The clerk blinked, then nodded. "We'll process it today. You want to keep the old mail here, or send it too?" "Send it all," Elaine said. "Every envelope, no more strays." She left with a small receipt tucked into her wallet and a lightness in her step she hadn't felt in months. Back home, the wind had started to whip harder, rattling the porch swing against the siding. Inside, the heat was on, but the mood had changed. Elaine stepped in to find Brandy pacing the living room, holding her phone like it had betrayed her. "Why did the Wi-Fi just cut out?" she snapped. "My upload crashed halfway through." Elaine didn't answer. She hung up her coat, placed her gloves in the basket by the heater, and poured herself a cup of tea from the kettle she'd left on low. She didn't need to raise her voice to be heard in this house anymore. Eli came around the corner, shirtless, rubbing his temples like the world owed him comfort. "We're having connection issues," he grunted. "Router dead?" Elaine stirred her tea slowly. "Aren't we all?" He stared at her confused. Brandy groaned and flopped dramatically onto the couch. "You don't get it," she hissed. "I was on a sponsored stream. I just lost my metrics." Elaine took a sip of tea and walked past them toward the sunroom where the router once lived behind a curtain panel. It was gone now. So was the phone that used to sit on the kitchen counter, a dusty landline that Brandy once called a boomer relic, but still used to order takeout when her phone died. Upstairs, the faint chirp of a disconnected line beeped from an empty wall jack. Elaine returned to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and opened her laptop. She didn't bother hiding what she was doing. She clicked calmly through her Chase account, then the old credit union one she kept just for bills. She changed the passwords on both. Then she opened her email and did the same there. One by one, like closing windows before a storm. She reached for a sticky note and peeled it off the fridge. It read, "Tasha, grocery auto pay, 15th, in someone else's handwriting. She crumpled it without reading further. Tasha walked in through the front door moments later, brushing snow from her coat, looking frazzled. "Mom, the house phone's not working," she said. "Did we switch providers?" Elaine gave her a long, level look. "It was unnecessary." Tasha blinked. "But my pharmacy—" "Can call your cell," Elaine said evenly. "Just like you told me to, remember?" Tasha closed her mouth. Elaine's hands remained folded around her warm mug. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She didn't explain. She simply waited. Upstairs, a door slammed. Brandy, no doubt. Eli cursed under his breath and stomped toward the basement stairs, muttering about signals and dead zones. Elaine took another sip of her tea. The power was still on. The heat was still running. But little by little, the house was pulling back into her, like a winterized cabin, quiet, efficient, sealed against the elements. She pulled her planner closer and began writing dates in ink. Not guesses, not threats, just what came next. Down the hall, Brandy shouted, "Seriously, what the hell is going on?" Elaine didn't look up. She turned her laptop to the final tab, a document she hadn't opened in a year, her living will. She scrolled through it slowly, her finger hovering over a section labeled Beneficiaries. There was still time, but not much. Elaine sat at her desk as dawn pulled pale streaks across the snow-dusted windows. The only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the space heater and the rhythmic click of her fingers on the keyboard. The document on her screen was no more than half a page, but every line had been scrutinized. Gina had gone over it twice the night before, tightening the phrasing, removing sentiment, reinforcing terms. 30 days. No extensions, no loopholes, no ambiguity, just lawful clarity. Elaine hit print. The whir of the old inkjet sounded louder than usual, as if the house itself were leaning in to hear. She pulled the first copy out gently, smoothing the page on the desk. Then 2 more followed, each sheet crisp, final, and unmistakably hers. She folded one, slid it into a manila envelope, and addressed it to Gina. The second she kept for her own file. The third she pinned to the corkboard in the kitchen, center position directly beneath the handwritten grocery list that no one but her ever fulfilled. She stepped back and looked at it. 30 days to vacate. Failure to comply. Will result in formal legal action. Tenant status, unapproved, unauthorized. The font wasn't threatening. It didn't have to be. It was factual, cold, lawful. The coffee had barely finished brewing when the shriek came from the hallway. "What is this?" Brandy stormed in barefoot, wearing one of Elaine's old cardigans like a costume, phone clutched in her trembling hand. She slapped the paper with her palm. "Are you kidding me? You're evicting your own family?" Elaine stirred a splash of cream into her cup. "Technically, you're not on the lease, or the deed, or anywhere." "You can't do this," Brandy hissed, voice rising. "It's the middle of winter. We'll freeze out there." Tasha appeared behind her, robe clutched tight, eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom, please, you don't mean this. It's freezing outside." Elaine didn't respond right away. She took a slow sip, letting the silence fill the room like rising steam. Then, quietly, "I know." Tasha blinked, stunned by the calm. Elaine placed her cup on its saucer and walked to the corkboard. She adjusted the paper by half an inch, not because it needed fixing, but because she could. Brandy waved her phone like it was a sword. "You'll regret this," she barked. "I'll post it. Right now. I'll tell everyone you kicked your own granddaughter into the snow." Elaine looked her dead in the eye. "Do you want to include the footage of you locking me outside during my birthday?" Brandy's mouth snapped shut. Tasha reached out weakly, like touching Elaine's sleeve might undo all of it. "We just need time, that's all." "You've had 8 years," Elaine said, her voice clear, level, and devastating. From the living room, Eli's voice floated in, "What's all the yelling?" Elaine didn't answer. She walked past them, through the hallway, and into her room. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a long, silent moment, letting the weight of the house rest on the other side. On her desk sat her planner, already marked with the final date. At the bottom of the page, she wrote a single word: irrevocable. Downstairs, the sound of Brandy's footsteps pounded toward the front door, followed by the low rumble of her voice through the phone. Elaine picked up her copy of the notice and slid it into the blue filing cabinet beside her will. She opened the next drawer. Inside, a small, sealed box labeled Security Deposit, photos, and a folder titled Asset Transfers Draft. As she reached for it, she heard something slam hard downstairs. A cupboard, or maybe the back door. Elaine didn't flinch. She placed the folder on the desk, opened it, and began reading line by line. Elaine stood in the doorway of the guest suite, the room at the end of the hall, with bay windows that faced the front yard, and a closet deeper than any other in the house. Her fingers grazed the old brass doorknob, the lacquer worn smooth. She had painted this room herself in 1981, a soft pine green. The trim still bore faint brushstrokes under the sunlight. She stepped inside. Brandy's clothes were strewn across the armchair in the corner. Makeup palettes littered the windowsill. A ring light leaned haphazardly against the wall, blinking with a half-dead bulb. The smell of old perfume and heated styling tools hung in the air. Elaine opened the closet door, saw 3 shopping bags full of fast fashion, and calmly turned away. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask. Instead, she walked back to her own room, opened her desk drawer, and retrieved a small brass keyring. Then she made 2 calls, one to a locksmith, the other to Home Depot. By noon, the hallway echoed with the sound of Brandy's voice rising again. "You can't just go through my stuff. This is literally my space." Elaine didn't even glance up from her notes. "It was mine for 40 years. She can go." Tasha tried to interject. "Mom, that room—" Elaine looked her dead in the eye. "Was your father's office, then mine, then a guest suite. It's never belonged to a girl who posts selfies for a living and calls that work." Brandy made a strangled sound and stomped back into the room to collect an armful of designer sweatshirts, tripping over the leg of the ring light as she went. A framed photo of her and Eli tipped off the nightstand and cracked as it hit the floor. Elaine didn't blink. By evening, the door had been cleared of Brandy's clutter. The space now held a single nightstand, a fresh set of flannel sheets, and an oil diffuser Mrs. Harding had dropped off months ago. Elaine placed it on the windowsill and turned it on. Lavender. Control in vapor form. The locksmith arrived just before dark. Elaine met him at the door and handed him the new lock set. "Just this door," she said. "Privacy knob. Inside-only key." Brandy's voice thundered from downstairs. "You're seriously putting a lock on a bedroom door now?" Elaine didn't look back. 20 minutes later, the lock clicked into place. The key was warm in her palm. After he left, she closed the door gently, turned the bolt with a soft click, and stood alone in the room that was once hers, and now was again. From the hallway, footsteps padded toward the door. A hesitant knock. "Tasha." "Mom?" Elaine opened the door halfway. Tasha stood with her phone in hand, lips pressed into a worried line. "I just got declined at the pharmacy," she said quietly. "My auto pay—" "I canceled all charges tied to my accounts," Elaine replied. You'll need to update your information." Tasha looked stunned. "But I didn't even know—" "That's the point," Elaine said, and gently closed the door again. The click of the bolt this time sounded deeper, heavier, a dividing line drawn in wood and brass. An hour later, Mrs. Harding knocked at the back door. She stepped inside, holding a portable space heater and a box of chamomile tea. "Thought you might need this," she said. "Heard the voices through the wall?" Elaine took both items and smiled faintly. "They're not used to walls that say no." Mrs. Harding placed a hand on hers. "Takes courage to reclaim what you gave away gently." Elaine nodded, and said nothing more. That night, with the door locked, the heater humming gently, and the scent of lavender thick in the air, Elaine curled into the freshly made bed, tucked the key beneath her pillow, and closed her eyes. Down the hall, the bass of Brandy's music returned, angrier now, laced with sarcasm, too loud for the hour. Elaine rolled over and reached for her phone. She typed 3 words into a message to Gina and hit send, ready for filing. By morning, Brandy had weaponized the internet. Elaine sipped her coffee while scrolling through Facebook on her laptop, a tab she rarely opened. But today it was necessary. Brandy's post had gone live at 7:12 a.m., a carefully filtered selfie with puffy eyes, no makeup, and the caption, "When your own grandmother kicks you out in the middle of winter, no heat, no food, no love, all because I stood up for myself. Elder abuse, invisible victims, family isn't always family." Underneath were hundreds of likes, heart reacts, and outraged comments from people who didn't know a thing. Elaine read it once, then once more, as if it were a case study in delusion. Then she opened a folder labeled Proof of Ownership and Payment History and selected 3 PDF files: Property Tax Summary, Utility Ledger, and Deed Verification. She uploaded them to a private drive link, no caption, no hashtags. She copied the link into a direct message to Brandy with just one line beneath, "Erase this, or I go public." 10 minutes later, the post vanished. Brandy never responded. Gina called that afternoon. She tried to file a harassment complaint through a third-party advocacy group, she said, her voice smooth and unsurprised. "They flagged it. I sent over your documents. We're moving forward." Elaine nodded into the phone. "I figured. I'm filing the formal court paperwork this evening. We're no longer in the warning phase, Elaine. It's real now." Elaine looked around her room, the folded quilts, the quiet heater, the teacup half drunk on the dresser. "It's been real for years," she said. Later that day, the doorbell rang. Elaine opened it to find Donna Mitchell, her old friend from the PTA, holding a mason jar of soup and a pair of wool socks. "I just saw the whole thing online," Donna said, stepping inside, "and I've never been prouder of you." Elaine let out the smallest laugh. "I didn't post it." "You didn't need to," Donna replied. "It's obvious who finally got fed up, and about damn time." Elaine accepted the soup with both hands. That evening, she walked through the kitchen just in time to hear Eli screaming into the phone in the living room. "I pay for this damn internet." "He didn't. And you can't just shut me down with no notice." "They could. I live here too." "He didn't. Not legally." Elaine passed by him like a gust of cold air. He turned toward her, mouth half open, but she spoke first. "Service is in my name. Feel free to open your own account, if you have an address for the bill." She watched something flicker behind his eyes. Rage, yes, but confusion too. These people weren't used to boundaries. They were used to drifting on entitlement and assumed access. Tasha came to her later that night, just before midnight. The house had gone quiet. Only the faint buzz of the fridge and the occasional howl of wind outside broke the silence. Elaine was brushing her hair in the hallway mirror when she saw Tasha's reflection behind her. "Mom," Tasha began, "I'm not trying to argue, but she's scared. Brandy's not handling this well." Elaine lowered the brush and turned around. "Neither was I when she locked me outside." Tasha's voice cracked. "I can't choose between you two." "You already did," Elaine said. "Years ago? When you stopped asking who paid for the heat?" Tasha stepped forward, hands wringing the hem of her sweatshirt. "If I talk to her, get her to leave peacefully. Will you help me? Just me?" Elaine's eyes didn't flinch. If she leaves by the end of the week, yes, but not one day after. Tasha looked down, ashamed. She didn't argue. When she turned to leave, Elaine said softly, "That room at the end of the hall still has your father's book collection. If you'd ever like to read something real?" Tasha paused, but didn't answer. The door clicked shut behind her. Back in her room, Elaine sat on the bed and opened her laptop. Gina had already emailed her a copy of the official court filing, stamped and submitted. She downloaded it, saved it in 3 different folders, then printed a hard copy and placed it under her pillow. As insurance. Downstairs, Brandy's voice rose again, more distant now, distorted through a phone speaker. "No, she's crazy. She has all this paperwork. It's like she planned this." Elaine stared at the ceiling. "No," she thought. "I remembered. You just forgot." Elaine wore her wool peacoat and leather gloves that morning. Real winter gear, not the cardigan and slippers she'd worn the day they locked her out. She stood in line at Buffalo's City Hall with her tote bag resting at her feet and a folder clutched tightly in her hands. Inside the folder, her driver's license, notarized deed, original will, utility bills with her name printed in bold at the top, and 3 photos, time-stamped and clear, of the birthday party she never got to attend. At the clerk's window, she spoke with quiet, unwavering clarity. "There's a claim made against my capacity. I'm here to show it's unfounded." The woman took the documents, scanned the ID, and frowned. "It says here you've been listed as mentally unfit in a third-party notation request." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Filed anonymously?" "Yes, ma'am." "I can guess who," Elaine said. She tapped the folder gently. "These are originals, not screenshots, not accusations, facts." The clerk nodded, flipping through the pages. "We'll get this corrected and flagged. I'll issue a correction receipt before you leave." Elaine waited silently, eyes fixed on the buffalo seal mounted above the office door. Her shoulders, though aged and slim, sat squared. She wasn't asking for her name back. She was retaking it. Back home, Gina's email came through by mid-afternoon. Subject, forgery report filed body. Brandy's anonymous report and false advocacy claims have officially triggered a citation. She's being notified. We have everything documented. Stay the course. Elaine forwarded the email to her own private archive, then walked out to the porch with a roll of reflective 24-hour surveillance decals. She pressed one onto the mailbox post, another near the garage, and a third directly above the back door. The next day the cameras arrived, 4 of them, sleek and modern. Mia, the local tech-savvy neighbor's daughter, helped her set them up without a word of judgment, just soft clicks of approval. "You'll want to angle this one toward the basement window," Mia said. "That's where most people try to get slick." Elaine nodded. "Exactly what I was thinking." By nightfall, Brandy's room was dark. The upstairs door to the guest suite no longer opened to her. The couch in the basement was piled with her blankets, a single pillow, and an open laptop balancing on a Tupperware bin. Elaine saw it when she passed by the stairwell to do laundry, Brandy curled up with her hood over her face, glaring at the blue glow of the TV, volume muted, but her presence loud. Elaine didn't say a word. She simply turned on the camera monitor in the hallway, confirmed the motion sensors were active, and returned to folding towels. The next morning, a new sound replaced the constant thrum of argument and accusations, the slow drag of cardboard. Tasha was packing, not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly, methodically, placing blouses into a shallow suitcase, stacking vitamins into a grocery bag, taping shut a small bin of cleaning supplies Elaine hadn't seen her touch in years. Elaine watched from the doorway. "You don't have to leave yet," she said softly. Tasha didn't look up. "I think it's time. Even if Brandy stays until the clock runs out, I can't pretend this isn't my fault, too." Elaine walked over and picked up a folded shirt from the pile, blue with tiny stars, one she remembered buying Tasha during a road trip to Erie. She folded it tighter. "You made a choice. Now you're making a different one." Tasha's voice cracked. "I forgot how to draw a line." Elaine looked at her. "That's okay. I remembered." That evening, Brandy stomped up from the basement to find a new sign posted on the refrigerator. "Notice. All shared living spaces are under surveillance. Tampering with equipment will result in law enforcement notification. Brandy tore it down and crumpled it in her hand. Seriously? What are you now, big brother? Elaine glanced up from her crossword at the kitchen table. No, she said, just the homeowner. Brandy's jaw clenched. You think this little game makes you safe? Elaine gave a slow smile. Number, the cameras do. Brandy turned and stalked back down the stairs, her socked feet barely making a sound, but the cameras heard everything. Elaine reached for her planner and circled a date in bold ink. 12 days left. The alert came at 2:07 a.m. Elaine woke not to a sound but to a vibration, her phone buzzing quietly on the nightstand. She turned toward the glow of the security app. Motion detected, basement camera, 302-0641. Clip length, 47 seconds. She tapped the preview. The grainy black and white footage showed Eli pacing near the breaker box, shirtless and slurring. Brandy stood nearby, whisper shouting, her hands flailing in frantic circles. He pointed upward, toward the cameras, then back to the box. His mouth shaped words like, cut it, burn it, get her gone. Then, just before the feed blurred, he kicked the base of the heater. Twice. Elaine sat upright. Her breath stayed steady. Her hand didn't shake as she hit download, then forward, subject line, clip 2:07 a.m., basement threat, property tampering. She sent it to Gina with a short message, please escalate. Enough is enough. Gina's reply came before sunrise, already forwarded to PD. This is textbook harassment and borderline property damage. You've got eyes now. Stay calm. Let me handle it. By noon, an unmarked cruiser rolled into the driveway. Officer Jensen stepped out, clipboard in hand, coat zipped high. He didn't ring the doorbell, just knocked, firm and formal. Elaine met him at the threshold with the printed clip summary in hand and the digital copy already queued on her tablet. He nodded once. Ms. Mercer, mind if I come in? No, Elaine said. Not at all. He watched the footage, watched again, took notes. Not quite enough for charges, he admitted, but we're opening a record. Official warning, and he's banned from the property as of now. Elaine signed the trespass enforcement form. Will I need to post signage? I'll leave some stickers for the windows, he said. He steps back on the property. We charge. Elaine walked him to the door. Thank you for coming out. He looked at her, and for a brief second, his expression softened from procedural to personal. Most folks your age don't record this well. Elaine's mouth lifted at the corner. Most. Folks my age built this house from the ground up. Recording it's the easy part. As the cruiser pulled away, Eli came storming up the basement stairs, coat half-zipped, face red. What the hell is this? I got a cop warning me? You called the cops on me? Elaine stood at the end of the hall, arms crossed, posture unshaken. You threatened my utilities, she said. You don't live here. You don't pay rent. You don't touch my wires. Brandy appeared behind him, eyes wide, hair matted from sleep. You're being dramatic, she spat. It wasn't a threat. We were just venting. Jesus, Nana. You filmed it for me, Elaine said, calm as frost. I just watched the footage. Brandy's lips twisted, but she said nothing more. Eli turned, fists clenched, then slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the pane. He didn't take anything with him. Elaine watched from the window as he disappeared down the block, just a shape in the snow, swallowed by wind. That evening, Elaine entered the basement utility room and shut the valve to the secondary heat line. Not all the way, just enough. By nightfall, the floor creaked above as Brandy paced. Angry footsteps, passive-aggressive bangs. The couch cushions shifted again and again as she adjusted for comfort that never arrived. Elaine stayed upstairs. She microwaved her soup. She folded a fresh set of pillowcases. She changed the hallway password on the Wi-Fi extender. At exactly 9:34 p.m., she looked out the window and saw Mrs. Harding across the way, standing at her sink, the soft flicker of a candle lit on the sill. The flame trembled once in the cold glass reflection, then steadied. Elaine held her tea to her chest and watched it burn. The municipal conference room smelled like copier toner and pine-scented cleaner, neutral walls, folding chairs, and one table too large for the room. Elaine sat at its end, hands folded calmly over a folder that was thicker than the case itself. Across from her sat Gina, sleek gray suit, reading glasses perched low on her nose, calm as a surgeon before a first cut. At the center sat the assigned social worker, a man named Callahan, whose clipboard had already been annotated before anyone entered. "I just want to understand," he said, flipping pages. "We've received conflicting accounts, including a claim of elder abuse." Elaine didn't blink. Gina leaned forward. "The only abuse happening here is financial, emotional, and property-based, and it's directed at my client." She opened a binder. Plastic sleeves glinted under the fluorescent lights. "This is the deed, entirely in Elaine's name, paid in full 23 years ago." She flipped the page. "These are the utility payments, 8 years of records, not one payment by anyone else." Flip. "Medical history, stable, independent, no impairment whatsoever. You'll find the primary physician's statement on page 14. Flip. Screenshots of family messages. Brandy calling Elaine a hoarder hag for refusing to pay for new shoes. Tasha ignoring texts asking them to shovel snow after storms. Eli never responding to anything but Wi-Fi outages. Flip. A printed frame from the birthday footage. Elaine, standing outside in the snow, clutching mail in soaked slippers while cake was cut inside. Gina didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Callahan skimmed each sheet, his jaw tightening by degrees. "This is very thorough." Elaine reached for a paper near the bottom of her folder and slid it forward. "This is the police warning against Eli," she said quietly. "Issued after he kicked my heating unit in the basement. That footage is time-stamped. It's archived." He nodded once and set down his pen. "The case is dropped," he said. "We're closing it today." Elaine exhaled, not with relief, but with completion. Tasha sat behind her daughter, hands in her lap, head bowed like she was trying to fold into her own coat. Her tears came quietly, absorbed by her scarf. Elaine turned to her. "You can go with her," she said. Tasha looked up, stricken. "Mom, you stood by." "For years," Elaine said, not cruelly, but plainly. "You'll need to stand somewhere else now." Gina handed over one last form. "We're also preparing a restraining clause in the estate file. Emergency enforcement if necessary. Ms. Mercer would like it on record." Callahan looked between them and nodded. "We'll attach it." Brandy stood in the corner, leaning against the wall like it owed her something. Her arms were crossed, legs twitching with unspoken venom. "I hope you rot in that house," she spat. "You'll die alone, you bitter old bitch." Elaine didn't even look at her. She picked up the last document, cleared her throat, and began reading. "This is a notarized letter affirming sole property rights, utility management, and financial independence. I, Elaine Mercer, have maintained this home without outside assistance and have chosen to remove individuals residing under false entitlement." Her voice didn't waver. She read the final line slowly. "Folks my age built this house from the ground up. Recording it's the easy part." As the cruiser pulled away, Eli came storming up the basement stairs, coat half-zipped, face red. "What the hell is this? I got a cop warning me? You called the cops on me?" Elaine stood at the end of the hall, arms crossed, posture unshaken. "You threatened my utilities," she said. "You don't live here. You don't pay rent. You don't touch my wires." Brandy appeared behind him, eyes wide, hair matted from sleep. "You're being dramatic," she spat. "It wasn't a threat. We were just venting. Jesus, Nana." "You filmed it for me," Elaine said, calm as frost. "I just watched the footage." Brandy's lips twisted, but she said nothing more. Eli turned, fists clenched, then slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the pane. He didn't take anything with him. Elaine watched from the window as he disappeared down the block, just a shape in the snow, swallowed by wind. That evening, Elaine entered the basement utility room and shut the valve to the secondary heat line. Not all the way, just enough. By nightfall, the floor creaked above as Brandy paced. Angry footsteps, passive-aggressive bangs. The couch cushions shifted again and again as she adjusted for comfort that never arrived. Elaine stayed upstairs. She microwaved her soup. She folded a fresh set of pillowcases. She changed the hallway password on the Wi-Fi extender. At exactly 9:34 p.m., she looked out the window and saw Mrs. Harding across the way, standing at her sink, the soft flicker of a candle lit on the sill. The flame trembled once in the cold glass reflection, then steadied. Elaine held her tea to her chest and watched it burn. The municipal conference room smelled like copier toner and pine-scented cleaner, neutral walls, folding chairs, and one table too large for the room. Elaine sat at its end, hands folded calmly over a folder that was thicker than the case itself. Across from her sat Gina, sleek gray suit, reading glasses perched low on her nose, calm as a surgeon before a first cut. At the center sat the assigned social worker, a man named Callahan, whose clipboard had already been annotated before anyone entered. "I just want to understand," he said, flipping pages. "We've received conflicting accounts, including a claim of elder abuse." Elaine didn't blink. Gina leaned forward. "The only abuse happening here is financial, emotional, and property-based, and it's directed at my client." She opened a binder. Plastic sleeves glinted under the fluorescent lights. "This is the deed, entirely in Elaine's name, paid in full 23 years ago." She flipped the page. "These are the utility payments, 8 years of records, not one payment by anyone else. Flip. Medical history, stable, independent, no impairment whatsoever. You'll find the primary physician's statement on page 14. Flip. Screenshots of family messages. Brandy calling Elaine a hoarder hag for refusing to pay for new shoes. Tasha ignoring texts asking them to shovel snow after storms. Eli never responding to anything but Wi-Fi outages. Flip. A printed frame from the birthday footage. Elaine, standing outside in the snow, clutching mail in soaked slippers while cake was cut inside. Gina didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Callahan skimmed each sheet, his jaw tightening by degrees. "This is very thorough." Elaine reached for a paper near the bottom of her folder and slid it forward. "This is the police warning against Eli," she said quietly. "Issued after he kicked my heating unit in the basement. That footage is time-stamped. It's archived." He nodded once and set down his pen. "The case is dropped," he said. "We're closing it today." Elaine exhaled, not with relief, but with completion. Tasha sat behind her daughter, hands in her lap, head bowed like she was trying to fold into her own coat. Her tears came quietly, absorbed by her scarf. Elaine turned to her. "You can go with her," she said. Tasha looked up, stricken. "Mom, you stood by." "For years," Elaine said, not cruelly, but plainly. "You'll need to stand somewhere else now." Gina handed over one last form. "We're also preparing a restraining clause in the estate file. Emergency enforcement if necessary. Ms. Mercer would like it on record." Callahan looked between them and nodded. "We'll attach it." Brandy stood in the corner, leaning against the wall like it owed her something. Her arms were crossed, legs twitching with unspoken venom. "I hope you rot in that house," she spat. "You'll die alone, you bitter old bitch." Elaine didn't even look at her. She picked up the last document, cleared her throat, and began reading. "This is a notarized letter affirming sole property rights, utility management, and financial independence. I, Elaine Mercer, have maintained this home without outside assistance and have chosen to remove individuals residing under false entitlement." Her voice didn't waver. She read the final lines slowly, dry goods, and a calm expression that didn't ask for permission. Elaine opened the door with a faint smile. "You're early." "I figured early was better than in the way," Mia said. "You said bring what I need and leave the rest behind." "So I did." Elaine took the bag. "Then I guess we start from here." They moved quietly without fuss, placing linens, unpacking a single stack of books, opening the windows to fresh air that didn't feel like surveillance. Later, Mia cracked eggs into a pan and added butter without comment. Elaine leaned against the counter, watching her, remembering how long it had been since the kitchen felt like something other than a fortress. "You don't have to cook for me," Elaine said softly. "I know," Mia replied. But I like kitchens that make sounds again. By evening, they were standing shoulder to shoulder on stools, hanging soft beige curtains in the living room. Nothing fancy, just warm. Elaine held the fabric steady as Mia secured the rod. "It's funny," Elaine said. "I haven't changed these since Rick was alive." Mia smiled gently. "Then they've done their time." Elaine looked down at her hands, the way the curtain bunched in her palm like something familiar rediscovered. That night, Elaine sat at her desk and opened her emergency contact list. The name at the top used to be Tasha, listed with 2 numbers and a secondary address. She deleted it with one slow tap. Then she typed, "Mia Santos, upstairs, room 2. She reached for a sticky note, scribbled Mia's number on it, and taped it beside the landline, just in case. At 10:42 p.m., her phone buzzed once. "Tasha, Brandy is homeless. No greeting, no question, no apology." Elaine stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she locked the phone and slid it face down onto the end table. She didn't respond. The next morning, Gina stopped by for coffee and final paperwork. She handed Elaine a folder stamped in bold, "Updated, estate distribution file." Elaine flipped through it while Mia wiped down the stovetop in the background. Everything was in order. The house now had 1 owner, 1 resident heir, and a documented history of mismanagement, correction, and legal reinforcement. "Everything you wanted is now in writing," Gina said. Elaine nodded. "And everything I didn't want is gone." The 2 women shared a look, more tired than triumphant, but honest. Gina squeezed her shoulder before heading out into the wind. After she left, Elaine sat on the couch with a blanket draped over her knees, a grocery receipt in one hand. Mia had bought eggs, carrots, lentils, cocoa, cinnamon, and a small pack of holiday cards. Elaine hadn't mentioned the holiday once. "I didn't ask you to do all this," Elaine said as Mia stepped into the room with 2 mugs of tea. "I know," Mia said, "but I like earning my place." Elaine looked at her for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, low and real, the kind that broke loose like a stuck drawer finally opening. Mia grinned and handed her a mug. Outside, snow began again, thin and soft, settling over the front steps like a fresh invitation. Elaine sat in her reading chair, legal pad balanced on her knee, glasses perched low on her nose. The early morning sun had barely risen, but the light was soft enough to write by. She stared at the page in front of her, the heading already printed in Gina's careful serif font. "Last Will and Testament. Elaine Mercer." She exhaled slowly, then began. "To Brandy Mercer and Tasha Langley, no assets to be transferred, no property to be inherited. This decision is final and reflects not estrangement but clarity." Her pen didn't pause. "To Mia Santos," she wrote, "this home, in full, with the condition that she never rent it to family, nor allow residence to anyone whose name isn't printed on a shared agreement. This house deserves peace." By the time Mia wandered in from the kitchen, hair damp, holding a steaming mug of ginger tea, Elaine was already sealing the envelope. "You're up early," Mia said. Elaine smiled. "Just tying off loose ends." Later that afternoon, she pulled down the storage bin from the hall closet, Brandy's winter box, once filled with knockoff designer scarves, faux fur jackets, and a half-dozen unopened shoe boxes labeled with brands she never worked a day to afford. Elaine pulled one out. Black suede ankle boots, 4-inch heels, never worn. The tag still dangled like a question. She boxed them up again, added 3 more pairs, and drove them down to the women's shelter on the east side. When the woman at the desk asked if she wanted a receipt, Elaine just shook her head. "I'm not here for credit," she said. "I'm here to reset." The woman smiled, took the box, and said nothing more. Back home, Gina arrived with a final packet in a white folder, heavier than the last. "Everything's updated," she said, setting it on the table. "Will, living trust, complaint record, deed title, all secured. Even the forgery case is now officially referenced in the legal notes, should anyone try to make noise later." Elaine opened the folder and skimmed page 1. It was all there. Not just her assets, but her absence of apology. When Gina left, Elaine stood at the back door and watched the yard. The snow had crusted over, blanketing the old stepping stones Rick had laid before his knees gave out. She slipped on her boots and stepped outside, her breath clouding the air like warm punctuation. The wind bit, but she didn't flinch. She walked the length of the yard slowly, passing the empty bird bath, the overgrown hydrangeas, the small compost bin that had once been Brandy's zero-waste project, abandoned after 2 weeks. She reached the fence and turned back toward the house. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a cage. It felt earned. As she stepped onto the porch, Mrs. Harding called softly from across the lawn. She was bundled in her long wool coat, hands tucked into her sleeves. "Chilly morning for walking memory lane?" she said. Elaine smiled faintly. "Needed to see it. All of it." Mrs. Harding tilted her head. "What you did wasn't cold." Elaine looked up. "It was clear," Mrs. Harding said. "And some people don't understand the difference." Elaine didn't answer. She just nodded once and stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. That evening, Elaine scrolled through Brandy's social feed. It was a new account. Different name, same drama. Another story, this time with blurry selfies and cherry-picked screenshots. The caption read, "Thrown out by the woman who raised me. Everything I had, she stole. Hope karma comes fast. Truth hurts. Homeless. And strong." Elaine's finger hovered over the screen. She didn't comment. She didn't report. She simply opened her camera roll and tapped share. One image. Her outside in the snow from that birthday morning, coatless, slippers soaked, face half in shadow, holding the unopened silver-wrapped gift. She typed one line for the caption. "They unwrapped my gifts without me, so I unwrapped the deed instead." She hit post. The screen refreshed. Notifications began rolling in, fast. Elaine didn't check the reactions immediately. She put the phone down after she posted and went about her evening, washed the mugs, fed the cat that didn't belong to anyone but still showed up, and sat with Mia as they watched a nature documentary narrated by a voice so slow it lulled the tension out of the walls. But by midnight, the phone had buzzed more than it had in years. By morning, it had become something else. The photo, Elaine standing outside in the snow, coatless, holding the unopened silver-wrapped gift, was everywhere. The light behind her made her look both abandoned and unbreakable. The caption, "I was locked out of my birthday, so I opened the deed instead." It traveled across Facebook, then Twitter, then TikTok, where strangers stitched it into videos with piano music and voiceovers. What happens when the woman who held the house key decides it's time to turn the lock? Elaine sat in her robe at the dining table, scrolling slowly, quietly stunned. Comment after comment rolled in. "This hit harder than I expected. My mom's going through this right now. People forget the ones they drain have names. She looks like my grandmother, and I hope my grandma never has to be this brave." By the end of the second day, Brandy's account was gone. Not renamed. Deleted. Elaine didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just clicked the icon again, saw the error message, and let it sit on the screen like closure. That afternoon, Mia set up the microphone. It wasn't fancy. A USB mic on loan from her friend at the community college, and a podcasting app with a free trial. Elaine watched as Mia adjusted the gain dial and wrote down bullet points on a yellow legal pad. "I thought we could just talk," Mia said. "Simple, your story, no drama, just truth." Elaine looked hesitant at first. Who would listen? Mia gave her a small smile. Everyone who thought they were alone. They recorded for 32 minutes. Elaine didn't perform. She didn't script. She told it straight. How Rick died, how silence filled the house, how that silence got mistaken for space, how Brandy moved in and never left, how Tasha stopped visiting unless there was something to be fixed, how one night of being locked outside became the moment she knew the house was no longer hers, not by law, but by usage. "And I wanted it back," she said into the mic. "So I took it." Mia uploaded the file, added a quiet acoustic intro, and titled it simply, The Homeowner. Episode 1. They didn't advertise it, but people found it anyway. By the end of the week, Gina's inbox was flooded. Clients, survivors, attorneys, A woman from Michigan who said her son drained her pension and left her living in the basement. A retired nurse in Denver who signed over her house to her daughter during chemo and hadn't been allowed back in the kitchen since. "I'm not just hearing stories," Gina told Elaine over coffee. "I'm seeing your blueprint become theirs." Elaine stirred cream into her cup and said nothing. Later that evening, she pulled a card from the small pack Mia had bought on her grocery run. It was blank, except for a silver border. She wrote, "For every woman who was made to feel like a guest in her own home, take the key, rewrite the locks. It was always yours." She tucked it into an envelope, wrote Mrs. Harding on the front, and set it by the door for morning. Outside, snow fell again. Not heavy, not loud, just enough to erase tracks. Inside, the house was quiet, but not empty. Not anymore. Elaine stepped outside in boots that didn't slip and a coat that had survived 8 buffalo winters without a tear. The air bit, but her scarf was thick and the sky above was clean, one endless, pewter-gray sheet pressing gently against the quiet world below. Beside her, Mia walked slowly, one hand wrapped around a thermos, the other tugging a wool cap down over her ears. Their steps left twin prints in the snow-dusted grass of Elaine's backyard garden, the same garden that had once been Rick's sanctuary, then Brandy's ashtray, and finally, still, forgotten. Now, it was just a place to walk, to see, to reclaim. "I was thinking of putting up the trellis again in spring," Elaine said. "The one with the climbing jasmine." Mia smiled. "I've never seen it bloom." "Then we'll make sure it does." They circled the old vegetable beds, now buried in snow, and came to rest at the newly cleared corner by the fire pit. Mia knelt down and struck a match, shielding the flame with her hand. Kindling snapped. Heat licked up from the pile like it had been waiting. Elaine passed her the thermos. They sat on the log bench together, wool blankets over their legs, cocoa steaming between them. "To warmth we earn," Mia said. Elaine lifted her mug. "And the cold we outlive." They sipped in silence. The gate creaked gently, and both women turned to see Mrs. Harding walking toward them, bundled in navy fleece, cheeks red from the wind. In one hand, she carried a plastic bakery container with 4 cupcakes arranged inside, one with a single pink candle. "You didn't think I'd forget your real birthday, did you?" she asked. Elaine's smile curved slow and deep. "I almost did." They lit the candle together, let it flicker in the breeze, and didn't sing. There was no need, just the hum of peace and fire and the unburdened kind of love that doesn't require fixing. After the cupcakes had been eaten, half frosting, half laughter, Mrs. Harding reached into her coat pocket. "I had this made," she said, handing Elaine a small box. "It's silly, but I think it's time." Inside sat a handmade ornament, smooth wood carved into the shape of a front door with a heart-shaped window cut near the top. Burned across the grain in clean cursive letters, "Never locked out again." Elaine held it in both hands like something sacred. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The fire popped, and a gust of wind sent smoke trailing over the fence. They stayed out until the flames burned low, then gathered their mugs and moved back inside, boots clicking softly against the stone steps. Just inside the foyer, Mia paused. Her eyes rested on the new frame beside the coat rack, sleek walnut wood, matted paper inside. The deed. Elaine's name at the top, no others. It hung straight, proud and utterly still. "You changed everything," Mia said quietly. Elaine looked over, her voice low but firm. "Just the locks." That night, Elaine pulled the ornament from its box and hung it on the coat hook above her keys. She brewed one last cup of tea, turned off the kitchen light, and walked slowly to the living room. The house was quiet, but not the old kind of quiet, not the silence of avoidance or erasure. This was the quiet that followed a storm. Earned, lived in, free. She sat down, pulled a throw blanket over her lap, and let her eyes drift to the front window, where the porch light glowed against freshly fallen snow. Outside, the wind whispered across the yard, dragging nothing with it. Inside, Elaine held her mug with steady hands and breathed deeply. Then she whispered aloud. Just once, not to anyone in particular. They unwrapped my gifts without me. So I unwrapped the life I actually wanted. And this time, no one interrupted her. Not ever again.